got Mike Norman, the co-founder of Wefunder, here with me today. Mike, it's great to see you. Welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So tell us what Wefunder is.
So Wefunder is a crowd investing platform that allows anyone to make actual equity investments in startups. You can think of us a lot like Kickstarter, except that you actually get equity in return for the money that you put into the startup.
And the reason this is important is why?
So right now it's actually illegal for everyday Americans to invest in startups, except for a few exceptions. The first kind of task of business for us as the Wefunder team is to actually get that legislation changed. So there are 3 bills that are in front of Congress right now that are trying to pass what's called a startup exemption to that accredited investor requirement.
Why are you guys doing this, and why is it important to you?
We're a group of 4 entrepreneurs who have all raised money for previous ventures and all seen friends of ours who have ventures that we really believe in, either struggle to raise capital or raise a round that we would have loved to have been a part of. So we recognize this is a real problem for the startup community, this access to capital and even having an opportunity to invest. And so when we kind of found out about this process happening in Congress to actually create this startup exemption, we got really excited and we were saying, this is something that we need to do to be able to influence this process.
All right, let's say this all goes through. VCs and entrepreneurs always end up negotiating the term sheet. How do you guys negotiate a term sheet in this context?
So we're going to have some pretty standard templates that will work for kind of like seed stage investments, and then for different verticals also. If you're a locally owned business, obviously kind of the terms of the investment and the exit's going to have to look very different than if you're a high growth web startup versus a clean energy play, for example.
Typically, when a startup has non-conventional investors, angels and VCs look at it for about 1 second, and they just say, this is terrible. Do you think that'll happen?
No, I think that the reason why we have that type, one, if the deal is structured poorly, then that will happen, and that's why it's so important for us to get this legislation done correctly. I think that what you have right now is a signaling effect, which is bad investors means that they couldn't raise money from good investors, which means that the idea is bad. If we have a crowdfunding platform that everyone is using to raise their kind of first rounds of capital, and it's just a way for them to hit those milestones before they go out to other forms of investment, that signal won't be there because it'll be such a commonplace tool to be able to raise funding.
Are some people saying this thing kind of looks like one of these penny stock markets where there's a lot of fraud and it's rampant and it's less regulated, so this could be a real problem? It could be another secondary market like that?
There are restrictions that are put in place to make sure that this doesn't get out of hand, right? So we'll do background checks through Wefunder to make sure that entrepreneurs are who they say they are. Have folks kind of like connect their social media profiles, so there's an added level of verification of identity. And individuals are limited to only invest a certain amount of money in any one of these companies and as a collective.
Okay, I've dwelled a little bit on the downside of this. What's the upside?
Access to capital for thousands of entrepreneurs across the country right now that may not have access to capital right now. And also, the idea of being able to have your users or your lead customers as co-owners of the company and what that will mean for them advocating for your product, telling their friends, a feeling of ownership that goes into being a piece of the company itself. It's something that just really, really excites us. I think all of us who have launched our own companies really appreciate those lead users and see them as the lifeblood of our community.
All right, so let's say this ends up passing. What's your business model? How do you guys make money?
As any Kickstarter, Indiegogo, there will be kind of a per transaction fee per deal. But we also want to take equity as a platform in each one of the startups that comes through our funnel. What we don't want to have is a business model which incentivizes us to just put a shotgun blast of as many startups as possible out there for then people to sort out on their own. We want to make sure that we're aligned with the investors that are coming to Wefunder to find quality startups, which means we want to take an equity stake alongside of them and have that incentive to make sure that we're vetting everything that comes through.
Let me push back. So you're going to take an equity stake. Yes. Are you guys going to put skin in the game and actually buy that equity stake, or are you going to just take it by virtue of being the platform?
It would be a trade-off between how much are we charging in fees and how much are we taking in equity. And we haven't run the numbers to figure out exactly what that proportionality is going to look like. But I think that the important piece is that some of our compensation is based upon a bet that a certain startup is going to be successful.
In that context, aren't you being kind of the nanny state of saying what deserves to be on the platform and what isn't?
We're not going to pick winners. I think that is absolutely an important point to make. It is important that we have that added incentive to actually make sure that anything that gets onto the platform has a legitimate success at being successful.
Okay, so let's say you sold a bunch of people watching this show. What can they do to help you?
So what we really want folks to do is go to wefunder.com, sign the petition, help us show Congress how important this can be to the startup community. We'll be launching on our Facebook page a kind of crowdsourcing widget where we can pull in questions from the community, ideas, thoughts, concerns. So anyone who's watching this video right now and has something that they want to ask or talk about, please go to the Wefunder page on Facebook and put those questions out there. This is, I think, a unique opportunity, especially for the startup community, to have a direct voice to representatives in Congress that are right now making decisions about legislation that directly impacts us as a community. So let us know what you think.
Mike, thanks so much for coming on the show. I've learned a ton. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.